Hey guys, I've just finished opening up 110 packs in the Grand Tournament, and Tom here has conveniently helped me craft a couple of decks for basically streaming tomorrow, because I haven't really had a chance to ladder up yet. I'm still stuck on rank 20, and I think tomorrow is going to be the first test of A, can I actually sit down at a computer and play Hearthstone for longer than half an hour, which I will, and B, how far I can actually get in half a day. And if we take a look at the collection here, Tom's got 4 decks for us to ladder up with, and they're all decks that any of you can craft as well and sort of play around and ladder up, and we're going to have a look at sort of top line what these mean.
Yeah, no, I'm quite looking forward to seeing how John gets on with these 4 decks. I think 3 of them, I believe, are probably good enough with enough time and if played well enough to get up to Legend. One of them I've mostly thrown in there for the lols, so see if you can work out now which one of those that is.
Just from seeing the names, I already know it's the one I want to play the most.
yeah. There are definitely 2 really, really fun decks in this, but one of them I believe is still very, very strong.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, let's go from the top down. We have the, I guess almost I want to say the bread and butter of the Grand Tournament, arguably, because the first thing anyone said when the expansion came out was that, right, shaman are just going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And at least, during release and to a very large extent still now, it really is. They've just been buffed quite a lot. So do you want to talk us through this deck and sort of where the new cards are?
Yeah. Alright, this is actually pretty close to the deck that I played right at the beginning of the Grand Tournament season, actually. So it's a Mid-Range Totem shaman. And, okay, the totem cards are actually some of the most impressive in the Grand Tournament expansion. So one of the staples is the Totem Golem. It's a 3/4 for 2 mana, overload 1. And I think that's slightly better than a card that costs 3, just because it gives you that nice early board control if you can play it on turn 2. Because actually there are far fewer good 3 mana cards out there than 2 mana cards. So you might want to play this on turn 2 and then use hero power turn 3. That's
if you had 2 of them in hand, would you therefore play the second one on turn 3 since you're overloaded?
You've always got to be looking to be as mana efficient as possible. So then you're looking at, what's your turn 4 going to be.
Sure.
But obviously, if it's even better if you've got things like coins, you can be much more flexible about what you're doing. But okay, so that's one of the big cards. Flick that in with the Tuskar Totemic. Summon any random totem. So that can be any of the totems that you get from your hero power, up to, your totem golems. Flame Tongue Totem is a particularly fun one.
That's just great.
That you get a lot, and which does mean you've got to be careful where you place that down. You always want to place that card down to the left.
Yeah, because anything that gets summoned appears to the right of it, obviously.
Yeah. So, because that, I don't know exactly how many totems there are, but that one comes up, I don't know, it's about 8 totems or something like that that you can summon. So a reasonable percentage of getting that card. And now we come to the big heavyweight of this new deck. The card that's, almost your win condition if you can get it out and if you can get to use your Inspire a couple of times. It's the Thunder Buff Valiant. Now, one of the reasons I like this better than almost any of the other Inspire cards is that you can actually play it on turn 5 as a vanilla 3/6 card. Because with 6 health, it's very, very difficult to take off the board. Sure. I mean, imagine you should have board control with this deck. And how easy is it to deal 6 damage just from hand on turn 5 or turn 6? If you're playing against a mage, they can fireball it, but that's about it. There are very, very few ways of taking that out. Alternatively, it's a fantastic turn 7 card. I've genuinely played games with this deck where I've been sitting with Dr. Boom and this card on turn 7 and gone, no, I'd much rather play this card plus hero power rather than Dr. Boom.
Sure.
So those 3 cards are the staple totem cards that allows you to play a more mid-rangey totem deck.
And how are you looking to sort of play this out as the game goes on? Obviously, to get to a point where you're playing Thunder Bluff, you have to have a lot of totems on the board to begin with, ideally.
Yes.
If you're playing against aggro and you just don't have that luxury, how does that affect your playstyle?
Well, the idea is that you should be trading okay with aggro. And if you ever manage to take over board control, you should have higher quality cards with the aggro. Anyone who makes a faster start than you switch into playing a more control type of matchup. And then if you do ever establish board control, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to win it back.
Right.
So this deck does run double Lightning Storm. So if you're playing against the more aggro decks, then that's a fantastic way of getting you in there, because they don't tend to have lots of minions with lots of health. And that can, of course, be buffed by your totems with +1 to spell damage, as well as your Azure Drakes.
So is there anything that you would likely swap out with this deck? Obviously, you're looking to get the zombie chows out reasonably early. But for example, Totemic Might isn't in this deck. Would that be a card you'd consider putting in?
I would absolutely consider sticking in Totemic Might. This is quite an aggro
It's on the
version.
Screen right there, by the way.
It is on the screen right here. Yeah, 0 mana. That's in a second, more control version of this deck that I run, which also contains the card Al Akalir, the Windlord.
Yep.
Which is obviously a shaman-specific legendary, and that combos really well with your Rockbiter weapon as an extra potential finisher. This kind of deck is all about the early board control, and actually does much better against aggro, because having double Earthshock in, that's probably the card I'd consider taking out, is maybe 2 Earthshocks you take out, replace with 1 Totemic Might, and 1 Alakalir, the Windlord, for example. But the idea with Earthshock is that it can deal with pesky things like a Mad Scientist, getting rid of the secret that's being summoned, or even better, a Leper Gnome, for example. That will render a Leper Gnome completely useless. And at the other end of the scale, it is a fantastic card against Handlock as well.
Twilight Drake.
Twilight Drake is actually the direct counter for Twilight Drake. But also, if you're just looking to push through that extra damage, getting through a taunt, you have a lot of ways of getting through taunt here. I mean, Hex is So actually, I think this deck here does a little bit better against Handlock than some of the other mid-range totem decks. The only extra thing I would say is that obviously Flame Tongue Totem is amazing, because if you can establish board pressure, you've got a lot of very sticky minions, like early game Haunted Creeper. Even if they kill it, you have 2 1/1 Spectral Siders.
You just have bodies in the way to continue using the Flame Tongue.
Yeah, you stick that in the middle and you can, that's a comeback mechanism right in itself. So you're almost always looking to play that out there when you're immediately buffing 2 cards. So, yeah. Anyway, really fun deck. Great deck. And, looking forward to seeing how you get on with it.
We'll see. No pressure at all. Now, the second one, which I'm going to take a wild guess and suggest that this is the one that's in there for the lulz, is the Discard Warlock. And where's the mana curve? Yeah, that's the mana curve, guys. This is gonna be fun. Right, where are the new cards here? Because I have a feeling from looking at this deck list that the new cards are gonna feature pretty heavily in why you put this together.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move straight to the most interesting card in this deck, and that is the Fist of Jaraxxus. Now, at first glance, this doesn't look like a fantastic card. When you play or discard this, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. So, if you stuck this in a normal Warlock deck, you're doing 4 damage to a random enemy for 4 mana. For 4 mana. So, when you think about it, when you're doing the card that's a little bit similar to, I guess, is the mage spell that does 4 random damage to a minion.
Oh, the flame
cannon.
Yeah.
Thanks. And that obviously costs 2 mana.
Yeah.
And that's almost certainly going to clear a minion. This, it might even hit to face, which most of the time isn't a good thing. But the key difference here is when you play or discard this card. So you're actually not looking to play this out, you're looking to discard it. So what are these extra cards that we've got in there? Well, we're playing double Soulfire, making an interesting return to Zoo Warlock. This card fell out of favour a little bit when it was nerfed, so that it cost 1 rather than 0.
0, yeah.
Yeah, I forget exactly how long ago. That was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, something like that. And obviously you're playing double Doomguard as well. So yeah, great chances to discard this card. Now, you're obviously running such a low mana curve, you're not expecting to have lots of cards in your hand at any point anyway.
Yeah, sure.
So other than that, it is like the old sort of face, very, very aggro zoo.
We've got 2 shield bearers in there as well now.
Yeah, Shield Bearer is an interesting card. And that is almost entirely in there because of the number of cards that exist to buff it. So you've got the traditional cards like Abusive Sergeant that you always see for helping trading up, as well as a couple of Direwolf Alphas. And then the extra card is the Lance Carrier, which, you know, it's another card from the Grand Tournament expansion, and it gives a permanent buff of +2 attack to a friendly minion. So that card works perfectly with your various sticky minions, primarily your Shield Bearer, but of course it's an extra activator for your Nerubian Egg. It also works pretty well, I guess, with the Void Caller. So you could play, the Void Walker, which you could play on turn 1. So that's one of the main reasons that you've got in this Shield Bearer. Obviously, it will help against aggro as well. Although you really shouldn't be having that kind of game against an aggro deck.
Well,
you should be running a lower mana curve than just about anybody. Other new cards, you've got the Wrathguard, which potentially has a very, very big downside. But
it looks pretty scary.
But I tell you what, I've played this deck, and when you play this on turn 2, you're playing a 4/3, and that's just fantastic value on turn 2. So you're not tending to get into long, protracted battles. Generally, if you're going to like turn 8 or turn 9, you're probably
dead.
You're not going to outvalue a more controlled deck in the long run.
Well, yeah, you can imagine a situation where someone plays out a Frothing Berserker, gets up to about 18 health, and it's like, yeah, I'll hit your Wrathguard. That also does face damage.
Yeah. Fortunately, you're probably not going to be playing against a warrior that gets enough armor to a really painful shield slam.
Ooh.
But there's definitely something wrong if a warrior is building up a large amount of armor against this kind of aggro deck.
Well, yeah, quite.
So realistically, what's going to happen? You might take 6 damage from a fireball or something, but generally, I find that you're losing games more due to losing control of the board than anything else.
That's going to be the source of several funny videos, I think.
Yeah.
Hilarious things happening with Wrathguard.
Yeah, but you should be okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's got just a very aggro zoo kind of look to it. A double Flame Imp, your Void Walker. Another new card, it runs 1 Flame Juggler. Now, again, you're looking to have early board control, and this is also a great card against aggro, because there are a lot of 1 health dudes out there early on. I'm thinking of like Loot Hoarders and Lapanomes and all of those kind of things.
Or even just removing Divine Shield.
Yeah, exactly.
Mini bots are annoying.
Oh yeah, I mean Paladin is another of the classes that has received an absolutely massive buff in this expansion, and yeah, Paladin is full of 1 health minions. So you just got to look at all of the aggro paladins that rose at the end of last season to realise how good a card this is. So we're actually running that over Knife Juggler, because this is such an aggro deck. We're not even running one of the staple Warlock cards, Implosion. So that. We consider that just too slow a card for this deck. If you're playing this deck well, they shouldn't have minions on there for you to be imploding.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. Right. Defender of Argus, pretty solid buff up card, and Imp Gang Boss is, again, one of the best 3-drops in the game. So, yeah, that's why that's in there. One Iron Beak Owl, just for getting through taunts and
Yeah, you'll need that.
all of that general stuff. You know, I can see a reason maybe to stick in a second one, but again, probably the games aren't going to be going long enough for 2 Ironbeak Owls to be useful. But actually, I think this is a super fun deck and good enough to really go up through the ranks.
Right, well, I'm going to guess out of the 4 decks, this is probably not the one that is likely to get up to Legend. Or maybe it's the least likely of the 4?
No, I completely disagree.
Okay.
I have this as one of the 3 decks that can absolutely make it to Legend.
Okay, well that could be a lot of fun to play, and of course we'll get through games really quickly with this compared to a more control deck. So I'm gonna enjoy either ranking up really quickly or falling very quickly flat on my face playing this deck.
Yeah. Right, should we move on?
Yeah, what have we got next?
Alright, this is in fact the deck that I have as the... Well, I have least experience playing this deck. So I am not really sure how well it will do in a competitive environment. But, having said that, it does look like a tremendous amount of fun.
Okay, let's go through.
So
I guess let's start with the new cards.
Well, okay.
I mean, we were having fun discussing, like, what's an unlikely card to play previously versus what's a new card. But I think I basically nailed all of them, so it can't be too difficult.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to look at this, so I've nicknamed this Mali Control, and you'll notice...
Control Hunter.
Control Hunter, yeah, Control Hunter, but there have been Control Hunters in the past that have attempted to use, is it Garzilla? What?
Okay, yeah, Godzilla.
Yeah,
sure.
But we haven't gone that route, and there's no King Crush in this deck, so it's not that kind of Control Hunter. The first thing to notice looking at this deck is there aren't a lot of minions in this deck. In fact, if we count them up, there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 minions in total out of 30 cards.
Sure.
So one of the really nice things here is we've got a new card from the Grand Tournament,
King's Elec. And that was in the Tavern Brawl as well.
Yeah, it was. Reveal a minion in each deck. If yours costs more, draw it. Now, this doesn't fit in most Hunter decks, just because chances are you're running a reasonably low mana curve, and you're not likely to draw the card. I've seen this get some play in Mid-Range Hunter, but it's very much a meh card as far as I'm concerned. But here, the worst thing that can happen is that you end up drawing the other King's Elec.
or not drawing anything.
No, I mean, if that comes up, then the chances are you're not going to win the battle.
Sure.
But other than the other version of this card, the other 4 cards are 5 mana, 6 mana, and 9 mana. So they're likely to win an awful lot of battles for you. Probably up in the ranges of about 70% of your jousts, I guess you're going to win. So this card is basically a play a 3/2 with a 75% chance of drawing a really awesome card that you definitely need.
Now, does that mean that because the King's Elec is the only other 2-drop in the deck, like from a minion point of view, that you would probably keep that in your starting hand over some of the other 0, 1, or 2 drops? Like, how much of a priority is it to try and get both of those cards in your hand?
I think it would be a must keep. Like, with the coin, without the coin, just, yeah.
Are you looking for both of them, I guess? Because that's going to be the tricky question, how much you desperately want the second one in your hand, right?
Like, I think if you've got one of them, and, like, one other reasonably good card, let's see. I'm trying to work out whether or not you keep secrets in this deck, because normally secrets are the one card you auto send back. Because you're just like, well, I'm going to draw that from Mad Scientist, but wait, this is a Hunter deck that doesn't play Mad Scientist. So you're actually playing your secrets out from your hand.
Yep, sure.
So trying to think, you might actually keep things like an Explosive Trap against aggro, just so that you can play it out at a sensible time. I can imagine keeping Explosive Trap against Paladin, for example.
Yep.
And possibly against Warlock. You'd almost certainly keep Arcane Shot. I can imagine keeping Bear Trap. So I don't know. Again, I've not had enough experience playing this deck to be perfect when it comes to the mulligan, but absolutely I think you'd be mulliganing specifically for this card.
At least one.
Yeah, at least one. And if you had both of them, you'd keep them. But yeah, depending on what else you've got. I could imagine keeping that plus an Animal Companion, because that's a pretty good card. That's non-situational. Because you're always looking to keep non-situational cards. So Arcane Shot is... You're always going to find use for it. Animal Companion, Eaglehorn Bow, King's Elec. All of these cards, you know, you can play them pretty easily.
Well, we've obviously now taken a look at the King's Elec in detail. You also glossed over one of the other new cards, the Bear Trap.
Yeah.
So let's go through and have a look at the new cards from the Grand Tournament that are in this deck.
All right. So yeah, Bear Trap is it's in there as a slightly more control hunter secret. In fact, that's definitely one of the things that they've tried to push with this expansion. Is, you know, they haven't given too many buffs to your average face hunter, but they've tried to go, look, is there a way that we can play a slightly more interesting control hunter deck? And this is one thing that we've ended up in. So yeah, after your hero is attacked, summon a 3/3 bear with Taunt. And that's actually really nice because it's an extra thing that people have to play around. So, you know, they're trying to like play around explosive or freezing trap. They eventually attack your hunter, and then the bear trap comes up.
Yeah.
And it can be really irritating because they might have just attacked with the one thing that could have traded favourably with bear trap.
Sure.
So yeah, that's pretty great. Other new cards we have.
Lock and Load.
Yeah, Lock and Load is the card that this deck is built around. Like even more so than Malygos. And you know, let's face it, most decks that have Malygos are built around that. But yeah, so we're running 2 Lock and Loads. Each time you cast a spell this turn, add a random hunter card to your hand. So the idea is we're running so many cheap spells, you're probably not looking to play this out on turn 3 or 4. I'm imagining you probably don't keep this in your starting hand.
Right, okay.
Because you're hoping this turns up around about turn 5, turn 6. And, you know, you can play this card, followed by a Hunter's Mark to get rid of one of his big minions, and then Arcane Shot it, or, you know, play out your Unleash the Hounds, for example.
Animal Companion.
Or Animal Companion.
If you've had it, you probably would have played it by
yeah, the chances are that you're going to be playing Lock and Load as part of a board clear. And what it will be is a combo board clear that also provides you with card draw.
Sure, okay.
And you know, you'll start to get some extra minions that you'll be able to play. So you're definitely looking for at least 2 spells after this to get value from it. Otherwise, it's a, you know, draw 1 extra card.
And because you're drawing them into your hand as well, it doesn't affect any of your King's Elec kind of plays, because it's not like it's introducing some low-cost minions to your deck. They're going straight into your hand, so that's completely fine.
Yeah, precisely. And that's one of the reasons that the Animal Companion is in this deck. It's essentially a minion, because you're getting to play out.
But as far as King's Elec is concerned, it's not.
Yeah, it's a spell, exactly, you know. And it's just amazing value for 3 mana. So that's in there. The other new cards, I guess, there's the Power Shot. Deal 2 damage to a minion and the minions next to it. So that's like a cheaper version of the Explosive Shot, which we're running 1 of.
Yep.
As just that little bit of extra removal. So there's a lot of removal in this deck, because the win condition is, well, like a lot of Malygos decks, it's when can we play down Emperor Therissian. So ideally we want to play this card when we've got Malygos in hand, plus maybe an Arcane Shot and any other cards. You know, you could have some really fantastic Lock and Load turns as well after you've played an Emperor.
Sure.
Like, I mean, you play that, and then the turn after you play a big Lock and Load where you end up drawing 4 Hunter cards, for example. So this could be the most awesome card that just straight up wins you the game, even if you don't pick up Malygos.
Sure, yeah, I can see how that would happen. Although one thing to point out, because we have gone over most of the secrets and spells, is that you don't often see misdirection hanging around there in Hunter decks these days. So And I see we're running one of them. Is this specifically to try and throw someone off, or what's the idea behind that?
It's a nice, solid spell. It actually runs as a little bit of removal. It's either going to be removal, or it's going to give us some health.
Right.
Interestingly, if you think about it that way. Because let's assume that we're not really taking board control. If we've taken board control with this deck, we've probably won.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it means that we've probably had a good lock and load turn.
Yeah.
So if you've got misdirection up, so at some stage they're going to attack your hero, and the minion they've done that with will either hit one of their other minions, thereby probably removing it, or it might even remove both minions in an ideal world, or worst case scenario, it will turn around and hit their hero, which isn't fantastic from our point of view, but it still saved us the damage we would otherwise have taken.
Well, the one thing to bear in mind as well, I guess, is that with things like Freezing Trap and Explosive Trap, like the more common sort of secrets that people play around, quite often players tend to find, my lowest attack or my lowest cost minion, to hit it into your hero to see what would happen. So in some respect, that does minimize the effectiveness of misdirection, in the sense that they're never gonna, if they have a bunch of minions on the board and one of them happens to be 8 attack, that's probably not the first minion that's hitting into your hero, right?
That's definitely true. I can see that. But
so is there like a specific situation where actually it's just much more powerful than that? Because what you don't want, or I guess, if you have no minions and your opponent is 7 on the board, look, you're probably in a dire situation anyway. But the fact that people are so used to playing around Freezing Trap and Explosive Trap might make misdirection like not as effective as it could be, if that makes sense.
Okay, there's a really interesting point to be made here, which is that we've already mentioned that we're not playing Mad Scientist in this deck.
Yeah, sure.
So you're not drawing this as a death rattle. You're playing this at a specific moment.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, you're playing against an aggro deck, and you might have both the Freezing Trap and the Explosive Trap in hand, or both the Misdirection and the Explosive Trap in hand. You're playing against aggro. You're not going to toss out the Misdirection. You're going to toss out the Explosive Trap.
Yeah.
Whereas you might hold this card until there's a perfect moment for it, where he's got 2 reasonably sized minions on the board, and they might potentially even take each other out.
Sure.
Perfect scenario is you get 2 4/4s on there, and you slip down Misdirection. They go, well, I don't really mind if it's Freezing Trap. I don't really mind if it's Explosive. Don't really care if it's Bear Trap. And it's Misdirection. And then it all works out perfectly. They hit each other, and you've just taken out 2 decent-sized minions.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So it's because you've got more control over when you're playing out your secrets that actually Misdirection is a little bit stronger. Plus, you're far less likely to have your own minions on there. Because obviously with Misdirection, if you've got a minion on there, they try and attack your face, it might not attack your face,
and
hit your minions. Here we're not really running minions, so again, less of an issue. Okay. So I think that's one reason why the card makes much more sense in this deck.
Okay, that's going to be interesting to sort of try and spot those opportunities for exactly when to play it, definitely.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most challenging deck to play, but it could be really worthwhile.
Okay, and you said earlier as well that actually the discard Warlock deck isn't necessarily the one that's least likely to get you to Legend. In fact, that could just be quite fun. Is this therefore the deck that you're most unsure about?
It's definitely the deck that I'm, most unsure about. I mean, people have been trying to make Control Hunter work for a long time. I have a good friend who tried to get to Legend with a version of Control Hunter, and I was just like, don't do it. It's like, oh, Tom, do you have any advice for me? I'm like stuck at about round 7. It's like, yeah, give up playing Control Hunter. So, yeah, it would be fantastic if you could get to Legend with this deck. But I'd be surprised.
Okay.
But I see absolutely no reason that you can't have lots and lots of fun with this and get up to rank 10. But it also won't be the fastest. Any deck you're running double antique Healbot is not for it's not for cutting through the ranks like a knife through butter.
Yeah.
It's a grindy deck, but hopefully a really, really fun one.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll see how that how that fares. And that, of course, leaves us with one more deck I have to play with tomorrow.
Yeah. Alright, well, I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is potentially the strongest of the 4 decks.
Right.
And it's mostly built around a deck that Reynad was running. And I actually had spent a long time playing with this deck and made one change to that, which was to add a Thought Steal. Just because I found myself in sort of mirror matchups and sort of quite a few mid-range battles where I was running short of cards. Because Priest is always a challenge because you need cards on the board in order to draw cards.
Okay, well, let's talk about, I guess, how to play this deck. But just before we go into that, take a look at some of the new cards that are here as well, for those who might not have seen them before.
Alright, well, I think it's worth mentioning because this is the only dragon deck that we're running out of the 4 new ones.
Yep.
And a lot of dragon decks have now become viable since the Grand Tournament expansion has turned out. And I've buffed up my Dragon Mage as well. But Dragon Priest is perhaps the biggest one to that. So let's take a look at these new dragon cards. Alright, so I believe Wimwrist Agent is a new card. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and taunt.
So effectively a 2/5 for 2 mana with taunt.
A 2/4.
Sorry, 2/4 with yeah, exactly, and with taunt as well.
Yeah, with taunt, which is perfect for playing out on turn 2. What else do we have? We have the Twilight Guardian. Yeah, this was an essential slot. That's been filled by this new expansion. So it's, again, a 2/6, which is very meh, but if you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and taunt. So 3/6 is absolutely fantastic value. Plus, it's a dragon itself, so not only does it receive buffs from other dragons, but it's a card that you might even potentially keep in your starting hand to buff up your various other dragons,
sure,
like your agent and your Twilight Whelp, which is it's your other key starting hand dragon. But I believe that wasn't part of this new expansion; that was in previously.
Sure, yeah.
But it's a card that's much stronger because of this new expansion. Alright, so moving up, one of the most important dragons as far as control goes is the Chillmore, and this is actually one of the first legendaries that I made sure you crafted.
Yeah.
Because you didn't pick this up in your 110 cards.
No, unfortunately not.
But yeah, so this is a great taunt. It's a 6/6, and if you're holding a dragon, the Death Rattle is deal 3 damage to all minions. Now, it's really disappointing when you don't have a dragon and it gets killed. A couple of times I've just forgotten about the fact that you need to hold a dragon in your hand.
Well, you never want to play this out as the last card in your hand, for example. That gives a lot away.
It does, but sometimes it can save you on its own. It is a 6/6 taunt, so in an emergency it can be used like that. But it's the Death Rattle, which an effect similar to Flame Strike.
Sure, yeah.
You're doing 3 damage to everything, so it's great as a board clear. If you can survive long enough, you've got this plus double Holy Nova for helping taking over the board against your more aggro decks. But mostly this is a tempo deck. You're actually looking to win pretty quickly with this. It's unusual for a dragon deck to not be running cards like Ysera, Alexstrasza, Nefarian, all high-end dragons that we've simply cut from this. And the reason we've cut them is for greater reliability early on. Like, chances are you're going to have turn 2s and turn 3s. It shouldn't be very difficult to mulligan with this deck.
Is that what you took out of the deck, one of those higher dragons, in order to put in Thought Steal?
No, what I took out was a second Shadow Madness. Because it's kind of an interesting mix, this deck. We are running a copy of Shadow Madness, which is again also pretty decent against aggro, and double Shrinkmeister, which I think is just a fantastic card because it works with the Shadow Madness, but its primary aim is to go with Cabal Shadow Priest. Potentially, because this deck doesn't run Mind Control, but potentially your best turn 10 play would be to play double Shrinkmeister and then Cabal Shadow Priest Ysera. Actually, you only need one of them.
You only need one?
You only need one. You need two of them if you're going to steal Tyrion.
Or Sylvanas.
And various other things. But that's the combo that you're really looking for. But yeah, so what we've done with this deck is actually cut a few of the higher end dragons to stick in some, staple priest cards like Dark Cultist, for example.
Sure.
It's just a great priest card because you want all of your minions to have as much health as possible, because a lot of times, you don't have that much card draw sometimes, so you want a play where you actually take something out and then heal up your minion again, so you get that little bit of extra value. Other than that, it's just a really, really heavy dragon-based deck. So we've got double Twilight Whelp, we have the Agent, two of those, double Blackwing Technician on turn 3, a single Dragon King Sorcerer, and that card is mostly in there to combo with Powerwell Shield. Because you don't find this neutral card in basically any other decks other than Priest. I guess it's occasionally in the odd Paladin deck where it can be buffed.
Sure.
But not very often. So we're running one copy of that plus for the Dragon synergy, double Twilight Guardian, double Azure Drake, which also combos with your Holy Nova, Blackwing Corruptor, fantastic card, and the Chill Maul. So that's a lot of dragons. So most of the time you're going to be getting the buff from those cards because
that's just comfortable.
You don't want to be playing out a 2-1 on turn 1. It's not what your deck's about. Pretty much your strongest start is to play out something like a Twilight Whelp and then get a Northshire Cleric out there pretty quickly, because priests work best with lots and lots of cards. So if you can get a couple of draws out of this Northshire Cleric, then great. Whereas playing that out on its own on turn 1, you want to be pretty certain that they can't take it out. It's so disappointing to play that card and just not get anything from it. Whereas we've actually got a lot of minions in here with a lot of health. In particular, I find that if you play out the Twilight Guardian on turn 4, most of the time they can't kill it. Again, we talked about this earlier in the Shaman deck, saying that on turn 4, turn 5, it's really difficult to do 6 damage to something. So they do some amount of damage to a Twilight Guardian, and then you play out your Northshire Cleric, heal it, you get a bit of extra value from your Twilight Guardian, you get the card draw, and so long as you're getting at least one from the Northshire Cleric, then you're getting value from that.
Yeah, it feels like the kind of thing where basically the further ahead you get, the more likely the game is to snowball in your favour.
Oh yeah, this deck is so much fun when you get control. It's just like you're sitting there.
So if you're behind with this deck, then so what are the main things you're switching up with your style of play as a comeback mechanic?
Well, you've got you've got some taunt in there. So your Twilight Guardian is there to help you stall out the game against aggro decks. So your Hunters and your Zoos and your Paladins. So you often end up playing that on turn 4, forcing them to get rid of their Divine Shields and stuff like that, and then turn 5 Holy Nova. The number of times that turn 5 Holy Nova has basically taken out their entire board, and then you just start overtaking. They play out a couple of cards, and you trade in on the next turn with Blackwing Corruptor. So you're starting to do your 2-for-1 trades, where you take out a card with the Blackwing Corruptor, and then they have to trade another card into it. So you're constantly getting
just
your 2-for-1.
Increasingly large amount of value you're getting from these cards.
Exactly. As well as your Cabal Shadow Priest, that's also a fantastic card against aggro. So yeah, these cards around about here are for getting value against the aggro. Whereas the fact that you're running a very low mana curve for a priest is you're aiming to snowball against control. The only thing that you're doing if you're playing against, say, a warrior or maybe a control mage of some kind, is you're looking to play around their big board clears. So if it's really obvious that you're playing against a control mage, for example, that you think is running like dragons and Ysera and Nefarian, all that kind of stuff, they've
and they might have flame strikes
about
as well.
Exactly, maybe they started off with an explosive sheep quite early on, so they're just looking to stall the game out. You probably don't want to have more than 2 big minions on there at any one time, so that you're constantly looking to, dodge the flame strikes. So so often you're just looking to have a couple of minions on there, and if they're not really doing anything, you're just healing up your own minions and building up a bigger hand. Because, the one way you can lose is if you overcommit to the board. They take it all out and you can't replace it. Sure. And that's one of the reasons that I threw in Thought Steal, because I found I wasn't actually coming up against enough aggro that I needed double Shadow Madness. So quite often I found that I had 2 or 3 minions on the board, and I just didn't really have much to do with my turn. I could heal one of them up, but it felt annoying to have to pass with 4 mana. So it's I think it's nice to run 1 Thought Steal in such a low mana orientated deck, because if we're playing against a more control type deck, the chances are you can steal some pretty awesome cards. It's definitely a worse card to have in there against aggro, but I think this deck...
Yeah, it really depends on who you come up against, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think this deck is already highly favoured against aggro. So I took the decision that we could cut 1 more anti-aggro card and stick in a control card.
Okay.
But yeah, sure, if you find yourself coming up against lots of mid-range and aggro decks, then feel free to take it out and replace it with another Shadow Madness or another Dragon King Sorcerer or something like that. Or even I don't know. That card is definitely replaceable, but personally I found it increases the win rate against mages and warriors and decks like that.
Okay.
So cool. Any other questions about this deck? I think it's probably one of the easiest ones to play.
Yeah, I think compared to the other decks that we've taken a look at, this looks more straightforward. Some of the combos that can come out as a result of this as well. I'm looking forward to some double Shrink Meister, Cabal Shadow Priest turns, for example, and really swinging games around that way. So it just looks like a lot of fun to play. Yeah.
Also, I think it's probably the most consistent deck. I can't think of a really weak matchup. I mean, maybe at a push, Handlock would be...
Removing lots of taunt would be one of the things I'm looking at, but again, it's with a lower mana curve than you'd otherwise expect. It's not like you're coming up against that every time.
If they're playing some kind of taunt deck, then chances... If you've started slowly, then sure, you're going to be in trouble, but you're hoping to have minions on there that you can trade into and heal up. So, even if you're up against a druid, for example, that's running Druid of the Claw, if you've got a couple of minions, you can run them both into it and then heal one of them up. So long as you're still getting decent value from your minions, I think you're going to be okay. Sure, there must be some bad matchups out there, but
we'll find out what they are.
But I don't think you're going to be running into too many of them before rank 10.
Cool.
I think you could just cruise with this deck. If you're ever on a nice losing streak, then switch to this. I'd be surprised if you didn't have a good run.
Great. All right, well that I think covers all 4 of the decks that it looks like I'm going to be playing tomorrow and potentially for the next week of the ladder season as well. Looking forward to start with this. We have the Mid-Range Totem deck, of course, the Discard Warlock, the Malygos Control deck, and the Dragon Priest. So yeah, thanks for talking me through that, Tom. Mm-hmm. We'll see how far I get with this tomorrow. And of course, if you're watching this as well, these are all decks that you can incorporate into your own ladder play and understand a bit more about how the game is now being played on ladder now that the Grand Tournament expansion is out. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you, I guess, on ladder and trying out these decks for yourself. Leave a comment, by the way, if you think there's any particular sort of combos that you've found that are really, really useful. If there are any adjustments you've made to these decks that you actually think would be great, make sure you go ahead and share those experiences. Thanks for giving us a like and subscribe as well, and make sure you go ahead and follow Tom. He's at TE Rendle on Twitter and produces some of the great Hearthstone deck guides you see on the channel as well. For now, though, I guess we'll get back to laddering. We'll see you tomorrow.